Come on. There you go. I can't sleep. It's what, almost 5 a.m. My wife is in bed, and so I can't necessarily run into her office and bug her about this. So I have to do the news. A real man can't sleep. I'm crossed. The story is under my skin, and so I kind of want to get it out before I move on to anything else. I've grown cynical as I've gotten older. I don't necessarily think that's a negative. I think that's to the betterment of me. This is one of those things that environment creates the individual. By the same token, I guess the fact that I'm crossed at all means that there's some aspect of me that's naive enough to get crossed by what is taking place. Again, I also find that to the betterment of me. I find both of those things to be positives. For the last 3 years, we have been engulfed in a conspiracy theory. Trump and the Russians. Now, that has been found to be wrong, and the Democratic Party immediately pivots to Trump and the Ukrainians. I gotta be honest, I don't all that much care. Let King Kong fight Godzilla, and we pick over the corpses. The reason I'm bringing this up is because if we are earnestly talking about impeachment in the context of rule of law, you'd be surprised how many Democrats that work at that radio station that I work at. And when I am attacking and owning the individual that is sitting with me, I do so because I fundamentally disagree with this perspective of the world and this stuff. If you tell me, which Democrats breathlessly do, that the rule of law is important, we care about the rule of law, rule of law matters. I mean, come on, Jamarl, what happened back then? You can't necessarily apply it in the sense of you can't go back in time, and he's breaking the law now, and the rule of law is infinitely important and should always be upheld. They breathlessly tell me that. They continuously tell me that. Okay, fine. Let's uphold the rule of law. Let's uphold the rule of law. Last week, Donald Trump came out, and Donald Trump said that the previous president of the United States, Barack Obama, engaged using our military, our men and women, in a regime change war. Catch. Was our military fighting Assad? Because he was talking about Syria. And if our military wasn't fighting Assad, who was? Were you talking about Turkish-backed fighters? Were you talking about terrorists? Which one are you talking about? Because our U.S. military wasn't supposed to be fighting Assad. The people who were fighting Assad were essentially the terrorists that were trying to knock down Syria. Meaning, if Donald Trump is right, which Donald Trump is right, the last president of the United States armed, funded, and sent terrorists with the hope and the thought that he was going to take down Assad, the exact same tactic that Obama used in Libya. The president has broad powers in regards to foreign policy. If this country has been attacked, or if the president believes this country will be attacked, the president, under our laws, can invade another country in order to settle the issue of attack. But the rub is what the president thinks. And that has been used as a fig leaf to allow all sorts of imperialism in the Middle East for the sake of oil and geopolitical politics. But it's a fig leaf. Nonetheless, Donald Trump, if Donald Trump is right, which Donald Trump is right, the last president of the United States must be investigated to see whether or not the military was being used for a regime change war, something that he never said that our military was being used for. Meaning, it is possible that the last president of the United States told the American public something that was fundamentally not true to engage in, you can call it rank imperialism. Trump said it, and in this case, the media backs him up on this. How can the last president not be investigated? Second point, Donald Trump comes out and says this.
Senator Erdogan wants to come to the White House. We have a very good relationship. The ceasefire is held very nicely. We've kept the oil. We stayed back and kept the oil. Other people can patrol the border of Syria, frankly, and Turkey. Let them, they've been fighting for 1,000 years. Let them do the border. We don't want to do that. We want to bring our soldiers home. But we did leave soldiers because we're keeping the oil. I like oil. We're keeping the oil, and we're working with the Kurds, and we're frankly working with Turkey.
Just so we're clear, Donald Trump comes out and says the previous president invaded Syria in order to engage in a regime change war, meaning to knock the government down of that country. That is not what Obama said he got in office for, meaning he didn't get into Syria for that reason. And yet, Trump has said that's what he got into Syria for. Media, meaning not mainstream media, they don't touch this. But Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, New York Times has gone into this notion that Obama, even Fox, has gone into this notion that Obama invaded Syria for the purpose of regime change. Something that he did not tell the American public and something that the American public would have never co-signed. Trump, however, then turns around and says, despite the fact that we went into this country for the sake of regime change, despite the fact that we were backing terrorists in pursuit of this regime change, meaning we have no legitimacy in Syria at all, based on what he just said. We are in that country entirely for regime change, something that we, Obama, never said, never told. Despite having no legitimacy in that country, we are not invited there. We have no reason to be there. The Syrian and the Russian military have full control of the situation. Donald Trump has said himself that the ceasefire is held, meaning that us not being involved in this process has allowed some level of stability to take hold and hopefully will flourish in this process. But you just said you're stealing the oil. You are in a country that you invaded, or Obama invaded, for the sake of regime change, and now you are saying we are staying in this country to brazenly, openly, nakedly steal the resources of another country. Can you imagine if Russia funded, supported drug dealers and put them in Mexico and the border of Texas, and then invaded Texas to say we need to do something about these drug dealers because we don't want these drugs flowing into Russia? And then say, while we're here, we're going to steal the oil. We're going to take some of these oil fields. That story sounds utterly ludicrous. But it's only ludicrous because Russia doesn't have the military capability, nor would they be insane enough to waste all of the resources in order to do such a thing. And yet that is what the U.S. is doing. And it's worse than that. Because in the pursuit of taking down Libya, we killed thousands. And in pursuit of this regime change war in Syria, we were responsible for the deaths of nearly 500,000 people. Despite Trump owning up to that, he still says we're staying to steal the resources of the country that we invaded for the sake of regime change. The president has broad powers. Yes. This naked imperialism. Most presidents have the sense enough to say they're killing people for humanitarian reasons. Trump, in this case, brazenly, openly said we are stealing the oil. How is this not illegal? I've said on more than one occasion, international law doesn't exist. But does the president's broad powers go that far where we can go into another country and steal the resources of that country? Is the president a king? And if the president is not a king, then is this legal? And if it is legal, that means the president of the United States can, for the most part, invade whatever country he wants and brazenly, openly steal the resources of that country, because that is literally what is taking place right now in Syria. That's an astonishing perspective to take. And yet, that's what Trump is taking. Now, rule of law is rule of law, Jamal, right? Democrats keep telling me that. And yet, this is not what they're impeaching him on. The president has just brazenly and openly said he's stealing the resources of another country. And yet, that is not what they're impeaching him on. They're impeaching him on stuff that the Democratic Party has done themselves. And I find that utterly astonishing. The president of the United States is behaving like a king. And yet, they don't want to impeach him on behaving like a king. They want to impeach him on this other nonsense. Trust us. Yeah, because you were so trustworthy with the Russia nonsense. This is brazen and open. Here's the rub. They would never do it. The reason they would never do it is because if they did do it, then the first question becomes, well, how did we get in Syria in the first place? Was the President of the United States, Obama, funding, training, arming, and sending terrorists into various Middle Eastern countries, and then turn around and say, there are terrorists there, we need to actually go and work that out? For all intents and purposes, false flag attacks that gets the American public on this notion of, well, it's okay because we're doing it for humanitarian reasons. 500,000 people died. How? How can that not be investigated? Meaning, the moment that you go after Trump for brazen, naked, open imperialism, then you're stuck with this notion of how do we get into Syria in the first place? And is it possible that we got there not for the reasons that the U.S. specified, but because the United States and the president wanted to engage in a regime change war without telling the American public that that's what they wanted to engage in? Essentially working with out in the day, running in the sunlight terrorists for pursuit of geopolitical and economic reasons. Yes, that's exactly what happened. If you touch Trump on this issue, Obama has to be, by definition, next. That's why they would never touch him on this issue. Then Bush. My point is, Trump has just admitted to something that no president would have admitted to because it flagrantly breaks the law. The Democratic Party, who screams about we must follow the law, we must follow the law, instead of this whistleblower that's not a whistleblower and it's probably mostly a CIA agent leaking information on the president, they want to focus on that, not this. Isn't that peculiar? It bugs me because I look at this and I say, this is brazen, this is open, this is clear as day, regardless of the powers that the president may have. I am unclear of what law allows the president to go into a country and brazenly, openly, and admit to stealing the resources of that country. I'm unaware. I'm unclear on that. And yet that's what's taking place. And yet the Democratic Party, who's screaming about the rule of law at this moment, won't follow the rule of law and impeach the President of the United States on this open, naked imperialism. And again, the reason they won't do it is because the moment you impeach Trump for this, you start questioning, how did we get into Syria? Was this just cause to get into Syria? Was Obama arming Libyans, meaning terrorists, to topple Libya? And were they also arming terrorists in Syria? Is that in our laws? And if so, why didn't Obama just say so? And if so, why didn't the president, meaning the last administration, just openly say, we are trying to topple the government of Assad using terrorists to do so? And the fact they didn't say it gets across the illegality of it. Trump should be impeached for this. And Obama should be impeached for arming terrorists to knock down another government that he didn't like. Like, share, subscribe. Thanks all.